Hi everyone, we're here with Coach Todd Starkey. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Just fine, just fine. So when did you realize coaching was something you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
Wow. Sounds like a simple question, but I think early on, just coming up in athletics, a lot of the people that I admired in my young life were coaches, and was just kind of drawn to their leadership, and was drawn to competition in a lot of different sports. Grew up playing a lot of different sports, and so it was just coaches were people that I admired as a young person, and enjoyed interacting with them. Felt like they were people that were able to bring the best out of me, you know. And so I think that's kind of where it started, at least a little bit. And then when getting into college and still participating, I just at at one point or another, I just never felt like I was really done with with sports, with athletics. Even when I was done playing, so I just kind of gravitated towards that. Had a couple of opportunities to get into coaching, not on a very high level per se. Small college on the men's side is where I started, at a small school in North Carolina, Montreat College, NAIA school, and had a great first mentor, Bill Robinson, who's now the men's coach at Milligan University in Tennessee. But he was a great mentor, first mentor for me in coaching, and just solidified that this is what I was really meant to do.
So you're an Ohio native?
Yeah, I grew up in northeastern Ohio. My dad was a professor at Youngstown State. Grew up in greater Youngstown area, and like I said earlier, I had the benefit of having some really good coaches um, growing up in that area.
Mm.
Kind of a hotbed. Youngstown's kind of a hot northeastern Ohio, Youngstown, Western Pennsylvania, kind of a hotbed for football coaches, really, but some really good basketball coaches in the area as well. My high school coach is 72 and still coaching. Crazy,
Beautiful thing, beautiful thing.
for sure.
I bet she's still as fired up as when he was 32. That's for sure.
Yeah, yep, no question.
If you were to use one word to describe a basketball player from Ohio, what would it be and why?
Um, I think basketball players from Ohio are just tough. I mean, I think it's a very blue collar, at least northeastern Ohio, Youngstown, very blue collar area. Strong value systems. Just by nature, don't back down, and love challenges. But most of the guys that I grew up with, and the female athletes that I grew up around, just kind of tough natured, very competitive, kind of relentless, and love to compete, and don't give in.
If you were to use one word to describe your coaching style, what would it be and why?
Huh. Well, I think it stems from where I grew up and kind of the way that I was raised as an athlete, but would be passion. I feel like I'm a pretty passionate coach. Just competitive by nature, but passionate. I think our players would probably describe me in that way as well.
Awesome, awesome. So you mentioned your first big break in the coaching world was at Montreat, North Carolina. Um,
I don't know how big it was. I mean, we the gym we had a gym arena that sat 400 people, so it wasn't big, but it was a good spot. So
yeah, I mean, one of my friends, she's the head coach in the NAIA, which you guys are in as well, right? And so,
Montreat was in it. Yeah, yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
and having coached myself on different levels, I appreciate the grit and the grind that it takes to put together a great program at that level. As you don't have a staff of 24, 25 people. You don't have director of this, director of that.
We don't
You're
have that at Kent State either, but it's a lot better than it was at Montreat. It was yeah. No, I was a paid assistant in my first job. I made $3,000 a year, and we did not have a recruiting budget. So I just Coach Robinson just said, um, you know, when you have opportunities to go out and see players, go out and see them. And I just kind of recruited out of my own pocket for that first 5 years. So and so I probably ended up spending more on coaching than I was getting paid. Worked other jobs and always had at least one other, if not two other jobs. Was raising young kids at the time, and just like we talked about earlier, I just knew that it was what I was meant to do, and so I was going to find a way.
mm-hmm. What was the best thing you learned during that time?
Wow. I probably that there's a lot of different types of coaching styles that can be successful. You don't have to be something that you're not. You can, and that served me well later on when I got a head coaching job. I think a lot of first time head coaches try to be, who they, try to emulate other coaches rather than really just be the best version of themselves. But kind of learned that early on, to just stay true to who you are and surround yourself with really good people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As a coach, what are your non-negotiables?
Well, the first one is, you have to be competitive. I mean, if you're not competitive by nature, you don't like to compete. Then all of the stuff that we're putting into it really is not gonna bear much fruit. Because when it comes down to, I mean, you can work out, you can have a sports performance coach, you can spend hours in the gym, you can have $10,000 shooting machines that have you know you know touch screens, and I mean, you can have all these different toys and tools. You can go to trainers, you can do all that type of thing. But at the end of the day, if you're not a competitor, you're not going to win much. And the other thing would be is communication. Not like we're going to be a team that communicates. Not just necessarily on the court. I mean, we you know not a new quote, but a quiet gym is a losing gym, right? A quiet team is a selfish team. All those different types of quotes that go along with um, good communication. I think a lot of young players equate communication as yelling or loud, volume and that type of thing. And we try and focus on what effective communication is, like what leads to effective communication, but not just on the court, but also off the court. Spending time having conversations about things that aren't just basketball related. I think players feel tied to a program where they feel like they have a sense of belonging, and are cared for, and that they matter. And that only comes from good communication. So those two things I would say are certainly non-negotiables for me as a coach and for our program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Today's young player, many, not all, don't really watch basketball on the women's side. What do you think? Why do you think that happens? What's the case, and how do we modify this? Because it seems like, if we were in a gym with 20 of our kids, maybe at best, half of them are watching, high level college basketball or pro level ball. What are your thoughts on this? How do we modify it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, once again, I think it comes down to the message that you're sending as a coach. I think it comes from the leadership that you're promoting and talking about. And I think as women's coaches, if we're always comparing them to male players, that that's not really the message that necessarily needs to be sent. Um, I don't think there's a problem with saying, hey, we've got to do this in a certain way and compare it to whatever player, but I think for them that they need to hear from their leaders that there are females that are doing this at a very high level, and that it's okay to pattern their game after women's players, not just guys, you know. And what are they hearing from us? Like, hey, are they hearing in practice that, or during the summer, or that type of thing, that we're watching WNBA games and maybe pulling things from actions offensively or defensively that we saw in WNBA games, or in other women's college programs, and not just from the NBA. So that's been the narrative for such a long time, is that we want to talk about and refer to just NBA players. I think it's been a great transition though over the last 3, 4, 5 years even, that NBA players are really coming to and supporting women's games, WNBA games, and college games, and the like. I think that gives some validation, right, to the women's game. Not that it necessarily needs it, but I think it also is a good sign that those things are happening. Obviously, the women's game lost its greatest male advocate in Kobe Bryant. That was real. There was really a lot of momentum that he was starting to build towards the women's game, and unfortunate, obviously. But I think some other NBA players, like Steph Curry, has kind of picked up the mantle with some of those things and is really doing some great things to support women's athletes, women's basketball players. So I think those are some things that, for you and me as males in the women's basketball space, I think it's important for us to continue to really promote women's basketball and not always be talking about their male counterparts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So your next job, you move on to the Division 2 level. Still on the men's side at that time, correct?
Yep,
Um,
still the men's side, on the men's side, right?
yeah, but then you make the transition. So what made that school an ideal fit for you, and how did you transition over to the girls side?
Yeah, so left Montreat after 5 years. Knew I needed to make a change, get in some different circles if I was going to really try and advance. So I actually took a step backwards in pay, if that's kind of hard to believe, right? Yeah, so I went from making 3,000 a year to being a volunteer assistant coach at the Division 2 level at Lenoir-Rhyne University in Hickory, North Carolina, um, and picked up a full-time substitute teaching job in town there. And so I was teaching every day, and then going to practice and coaching, and did that for the first year. The second year, I was asked by our athletics director to start the women's tennis program back, because I had also played tennis in college. So was a two-sport athlete in basketball and tennis. So I coached. I was a part-time head women's tennis coach in college, a full-time substitute teacher, an assistant men's basketball coach. That was year 7 in coaching. And then year 8, that summer after that year, the women's basketball coach at Lenoir-Rhyne left to take a Division 1 assistant coaching job. And the athletic director came to me and asked me if I would be the interim or acting head coach for the women's program, because it was late. It was August. Yeah, and I had never really thought about coaching on the women's side. I was just kind of had blinders on and was focused on trying to pursue my career on the men's side. And I said, why not? I mean, I want to be a coach. Why am I putting qualifying factors on in what form, So I accepted that position, but I told him I wanted the job, and he said, well, I'm going to go through the search process, and at the end of the day, if you're the best candidate, I'll offer you the job. He went through the search process. I treated the job like it was already mine for a month, and I guess I showed enough to him that that I deserved to be the leader of that program. Very fortunate that I got that opportunity by the late Neil McGahee, who was my AD that gave me my first. That was my big opportunity, really. I feel like, and then so I was the head women's coach at Lenoir-Rhyne for the next 9 years, and had a great run there, and have never looked back. Never, get the question a lot. Would you go back to the men's side? Why aren't you coaching the men? This, that, and the other. I said, because I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And I just have really enjoyed coaching on the women's side so much. It's been great to kind of turn into coach and dad for all these young women as I've had the opportunity to kind of come through the ranks here.
You were highly successful during your time there. 2009, you were in Division II Coach of the Year. Um, your team was the number one seed in the South. Lost in the second round. What made that team so dynamic? And looking back at that big game that you guys had, what adjustments would you have made that you felt would have allowed you to win that game?
Well, our best player not getting hurt would probably be an adjustment I would make. That team was very, very talented. That 08, 09 team was a team that was talented, and that would have probably competed in the MAC, Mid American, and this league's brutal. As a Division I mid major league, that team at Lenoir-Rhyne was very talented. We got a Duke transfer at semester break. She was eligible at semester. She was already on campus and in classes, but people are like, well, the reason why you had such a great year is because you got a Duke transfer. I said, well, we were 9-0 before we got her, before she played a game. So we had a really good team. A lot of talent, and it just kind of gained momentum. We were 27-5 that year, and Brittany Mitch was our transfer from Duke, and during the regular season, with about 5 or 6 games left in the regular season, she got undercut on kind of a dirty play and landed on her wrist and fractured her wrist. It was the type of fracture where she could brace it. It was on her shooting hand. She could brace it and not cause any more damage and still play, but she couldn't really shoot, as you can imagine. So she missed a number of games there, but we still were able to win a lot. But when you get in the NCAA tournament, everybody's good, and we lost to a team in the second round that had 11 Division I transfers. And we had 1 Division I transfer. So it was. I think if Brittany would have been healthy the whole way through, I think it was a national championship team. It was we were really playing well, and had she been 100%, I think we would have really had a great run there. But people don't realize the top 20, top 25 Division II teams in the country are as good as a lot of mid-major Division I teams. It's really good basketball.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I actually talked to the Bowling Green coach, and she is coach at Ashland. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna ask her one of the same questions I'm gonna ask you is, your team's playing at a very high level. I think a lot of people, there's casual people between coaches and fans, that if your kid's playing at Division II level, it's just like you're such a large step behind, when I know that there's a lot of Division II schools that will beat handedly some, Division I programs.
Yeah.
So
And we used to in exhibition games and
yeah,
scrimmages. We used to beat some Division I teams. And I know Coach Freilich at Bowling Green. Obviously, we're very competitive with. We go up head to head with Bowling Green in the league, and she's a phenomenal coach. But her teams I know she would love to have taken some of her best teams at Ashland and go up against some of the teams in the MAC. Those teams at Ashland that she had were phenomenal as well. So, yeah, I know she'll probably have the same narrative
Yeah.
really good Division II basketball versus a lot of Division I.
Mhm. So as you guys, advance, you're playing at an elite level. Honestly, you don't got to tell me the teams, but was it hard to begin to schedule games against Division I opponents? Were people kind of, you know, giving you respectfully declines or,
Oh,
you
sure, yeah, no, and
know?
that's a good problem to have. I mean, it makes things more difficult, but I mean, my first year when I got here, we still had 6 games to schedule. It was May, and I could have scheduled 30. As we were trying to get the schedule set, everybody wanted to play us because the team I inherited had won 5 or 6 games the year before. And I'm a first time coach, and so everybody wanted to crack at us. Want to get us on the schedule. And then after we had the biggest turnaround in Division I in the country that year. Went from 5 Division I wins to 19 with the same players. Nobody wanted to play us all of a sudden. It was kind of funny how that works. So yeah, it makes it more challenging. I mean, it's challenging for us, but the teams that come to mind that have a really hard time scheduling games are teams like Florida Gulf Coast and South Dakota State and teams like that are just perennial top borderline top 25 teams in the country in Division I, but nobody wants to play those teams, because it's not necessarily a glamorous win because it's not one of the blue blood programs, but those teams are so good. So it makes it more challenging, but good problem to have, I guess. Better than the alternative.
That's true. That's true. Um, Pros and cons coaching Division II versus Division I, if there are any. You can
That's
take
a
all time.
question. Sure. I mean, right. One of my big statements is there's trade offs and everything, right? And and after leaving Lenoir-Rhyne, I had the opportunity to be an assistant coach at Indiana in the Big Ten, which was an incredible leap, to go from 1,600 students, Division II, and one full-time assistant, and some volunteers, and driving vans, to games. Driving as a head coach, driving a van 4.5 5 hours to a game. Eating Subway for pregame meal, and half a pizza afterwards for a couple slices for postgame or whatever, and then driving back home. And then you go to Indiana, and all of a sudden you're getting on chartered flights to go fly to games and stuff like that. Um, and then Kent State. Kent State's kind of a nice in between, right? I think one of the things that's lost a lot of times in the larger university systems is that feeling of camaraderie among the coaching staff and the athletes. Sometimes everything is spread out, and everything feels a bit corporate, and transactional. Uh, I really enjoyed my time at Lenoir-Rhyne. I still speak with a number of coaches that I worked with and colleagues and that type of thing down there. It was definitely a family atmosphere. Everybody was cheering for each other and supporting each other, and you knew people as you walked across campus. You knew virtually everybody. But you didn't have the resources. You were scrambling just to do just about anything. So Kent State is a situation where we have obviously more resources. It's a matter of how your resources match up against your peers, like your conference opponents. That's what matters the most. Like, so at Kent State, it's so much more as far as resources versus Lenoir-Rhyne, but it's not really in comparison to that level, right? How much did we have at Lenoir-Rhyne and resources and facilities and so, administrative support in comparison to that level, right? So a lot of times we compare, like, so Kent State's it's a great league. I always tell people I came in the league at the wrong time because this has been the best the league has ever been for like 6 straight years. There were a couple teams here and there, before my time here in the league that obviously were really good. But as far as the whole league, the MAC is so good. It just there's no off nights. You can't you play the top in the league, you're probably going to get beat. You play the bottom of the league and you don't show up, you're probably going to get beat. It's just there's no easy games. And so I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I talked through all that. You could probably pull out the answer somewhere in what I said.
Very good.
My players would probably say the same thing. They have to crack the code sometimes on what I'm trying to get across.
Very good, coach. We're good. So you mentioned you go over to Indiana, Power Five program. You're working alongside Coach Terry Morin. Um, Actions and words are two different things. Tell us one thing you learned via observation and one thing you learned via conversation from Coach.
Oh yeah, that's great. So got there, Coach Morin's first year, and um, was very fortunate that Trisha Cullip, who's a Toledo, made a phone call to her and recommended me for that job, or I wouldn't. I didn't know her, So it was sometimes that's how it works, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know, and who's willing to speak on your behalf when you're not in not in the room, right? So got to Indiana, and it was definitely a rebuild. We finished 12th our first year there, but one of the things that I learned by observation is um, you talk about somebody who just poured herself into the program and said we're going to make this good. I just observed watching her every day put her head down and go to work, and we're going to figure this out. And when we had setbacks, was it going to be um, um, was it going to be something that was going to hold us back, or was it going to be something that was going to be something that helped propel us forward? So yeah, her mindset in those days was really something that was to be admired when we really didn't see a lot of the fruit of that right away. In conversation, I think you know she was always and when we would talk and meet and stuff, she was always kind of pushing me another level, you know, um, trying to really get me to think and work and scout and um, like that basketball was like fresh clay, and we had to really mold it. Like we really had to go to work on trying to what are we going to do here, and how are we going to make this work, and defensively, this didn't work, but how about this, or that type of thing. And it really got me to think. It was important for me. My 2 years in Indiana, I thought when I was at Lenoir-Rhyne, I'd won, like you said before, I'd won National Coach of the Year in 2009, and I probably started feeling myself a little bit and thinking, oh yeah, my career is going to just skyrocket and that type of thing. And that didn't happen. It didn't happen that way for me, because I didn't get to Indiana until, it was 13, 14, I think it was. But I needed Indiana, and I needed Coach Morin, and I needed the Big Ten to help me expand as a coach and really push me out of my comfort zone and do scouting reports against Ohio State and Michigan State and Maryland and then like. And man, it just really from a X's and O's and basketball IQ and overall coaching, it really pushed me out of my comfort zone. It was good, and it was good for me. Yeah. So I look back and I'm very grateful for my 2 years there under her leadership, and she's done an unbelievable job. We went from 12th to 4th our second year. Went to the NCAA tournament. Beat Georgia with a 9 seed. They were the 8 seed. Beat Georgia up at Notre Dame, and then lost to Notre Dame, I think, by 17 in an unbelievable atmosphere. You know, And then I got the Kent State opportunity after that. So it was, and she's done unprecedented things at Indiana, going to Elite Eights and Sweet 16s and top 10 in the country and stuff like that. So it was a great time.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned you move on to Kent State. Um, what made this program an ideal fit for you?
Yeah, I don't know if I thought it was an ideal fit, and I'm not sure they necessarily thought I was the ideal fit. But I've never been the first choice for any job that I've gotten, and that's fine. I think there were some other people that had turned down the job. Um, I didn't necessarily think that I had a chance at it, to be quite honest with you. And I had a lot of people that told me that it wasn't necessarily a good job. The facilities, at the time, maybe the facilities weren't the best, or budget, or whatever, the current leadership or whatever. Everybody's got something to say. And a good friend of mine and mentor of mine, Joe McEwen, who is the women's coach at Northwestern, who consequently is a Kent State grad, played basketball at Kent State. We found an old picture of him. It's kind of funny. But I called him and I said, I told him I was interviewing for the job, this, that, and the other. And I said, Coach, everybody's telling me this isn't really a good job. And he said, well, first of all, it doesn't have to be a good job for them. It just has to be a good job for you. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, Coach, when was the last time you were offered a head coaching job at a Division I school? And I said, never. He said, that's why it's a good job for you. so I just jumped it. It was closer to home, right? I grew up about 40 minutes from here, and I just jumped in with both feet and took the plunge and haven't looked back there either. I think you have to be in anything in life if you're going to be successful, and you got to be all in. There's going to be some risk involved, and it has turned out to be an ideal fit for me. And I think Kent State, I've got 2 contract extensions, so they must feel a certain way about me, or they feel like they can't get anybody else. I don't know.
Either
Yeah,
or.
but either way, I'll take it.
So, throughout your career, you've had your fair bit of interviews. Um, as a young coach, experiencing some of those things right now in my career. Um, Guidance from somebody like you is very, very important. And by that, I mean, while you haven't seen everything, you've seen a fair bit in regards to the questions, preparation for those big interviews, things like that. So I'm going to ask you a question. What would you say is you better be able to answer that question type of thing when you're going into an interview? And what question, looking back when you had that interview, that you were like, yeah, that one caught me. Like, that one really caught me. I wasn't really prepared to answer that one. So those 2 things.
Well, let me start with the second one first. Okay. I don't feel like I've ever been in an interview where I've been caught off guard with a question. The reason why I feel like that's the case is because I've been around some very good mentors and feel like I've been prepared um, for whatever's coming. Some of the interviews that I've been on kind of came across as easy to me. Like, wow, I know that if I was in an interview with the coach that I was currently working for, they would ask me tougher questions. I feel like the number one quality you have to have as an assistant coach, and definitely as a head coach, is adaptability. You really have to understand the landscape of who's asking the questions. Like, who's your audience, right? They tell you in public speaking, the number one thing you need to know is who your audience is, right? Who you're speaking to. I think the same thing is true in the interview process. Is you got to know who you're talking to, and have a feeling for what's this person about, or what's this committee about, or what's this school about, or what makes the most sense for them. What do they? And a lot of the interview process is about what they need to hear, right? We talk about being good mentors and stuff, and you need to surround yourself with people that will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. The interview process is different. It's about telling them what they want to hear, and that's the truth of it. So I think at the end of the day, without being disingenuous, right? So I think if you can balance those two things, that's a big word for me, is balance. As you're answering questions, if you can have balance in your answers and figure out what they really want to hear, without being disingenuous, you're going to be able to answer about every question you have. Now, if you're just unprepared, if you're not ready for the moment, then at the end of the day, then it comes back to preparing yourself better. Asking better questions of yourself, listening to more podcasts, or talking to more people, or those different types of things. But as you were asking that question, I was trying to think, was there a question that I've been asked on an interview that's really stumped me? Um, I tell you, one of the more odd interviews that I've ever been on, it was for a head coaching position. I won't name the school but we get through the interview. I think everything's going really well, and then all of a sudden, he said this was an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s, who'd been in the business for a lot of years or whatever. But he said, "All right, we're going to do some word association." I had never, on an interview, I'd never done that before. So that threw me off.
That you need.
Like, I'm going to give you a word, and I want you to give me a word back that comes, the first thing that comes to mind. And I thought I was doing pretty good or whatever. And then he said the word love. And I was like, how do you even define, like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I think I said, love is love. And I look back at that, I'm like, what did that even mean or whatever? I'm just like, I almost want to be like, in terms of what? Like, what are you talking about? There's a lot of different, like you talk about in the Bible, there's different types of love. There's, what context are you talking about? But in the course of an interview, you don't want to, come back and be like, all right, can you explain that further? What kind of love are you talking about? So I think I just said love. Maybe I didn't get the job because of it. I don't know. But I will say that's probably the only thing that's really thrown me off in an interview, was the word association thing. And we came to that, and I was just kind of, at a loss a little bit, I guess, if that makes sense. But other than that, I think the questions that I've been asked, or the way I've responded to questions, have just been from the heart, and but also trying to understand going in, like, who am I talking to? Am I talking? Is this a search committee that has somebody from admissions on it? That has somebody from, like, what are their concerns? The vice president for enrollment management doesn't care if I know how to, break a 1-3-1. They want to know if I can retain students, what type of students I'm going to bring in. If it's a head count sport where you have to have a roster minimum, am I going to be able to meet that? And that's what her concerns or his concerns are, right? So I think that has more to do with the interview process and how to answer questions, is who's asking them.
Yeah, yeah. PSA. Um, what is it? What does that mean? How do you work on that every day?
PSA.
Passionate, smart, adaptable players.
Okay. I thought you were talking about a public service announcement.
Now we're doing word association. I'm not that guy.
See, I'm a different generation than you. PSAs were public service announcements. Passionate, smart, adaptable players.
Mm-hmm.
How do I look for those, or what?
You didn't mention that once. In regards to a quote that you made. You said everyone talks about playing fast. We're going to play good basketball. Three key terms of success: talk, box, and run. And we're going to utilize that with passion, smart, and adaptable players. So
I think that was that from my press conference when I got to Kent
yeah,
State.
yeah, I am
Back 7 years here.
due diligence, and we can focus on offensively. Um, how are you guys so efficient? How do you maintain such a high level of success offensively?
Well, I think if you look back to, first of all, where I was at that point 7 years ago, I wanted to kind of send a statement to. We had in that room when I said that we had um, our team, our players. They really didn't know who I was yet, and so I wanted to send a message that this is the type of players that I admire. Are players that are passionate, smart, and adaptable. And we've talked about that already in this interview, and it's probably come out just in our conversation that, what is one word that describes you as a head coach? I said passion, right? I talked about one of the number one qualities you have to have as an assistant or a head coach, and that's being adaptable. So I guess I always circle back to that combination of words without even knowing it at some point, right? I always talk about working smarter, not harder, and how can we be efficient towards winning. So I think that stuff just kind of comes out of me. How do I look for that in players? I mean, like, once again, we go out and we're sitting in a convention center that has 80 courts in it, and 4,000 players, and how do you differentiate the fine line between this player and this player, and who you're going to offer a scholarship to and who are you not going to offer a scholarship to? Well, 5 teams in the league have offered the scholarship and I don't offer that player. Well, why not? Well, I don't know. It may, I know what suits my eye and that type of thing. But I'll pass up on talent all day long to find a less talented player that plays with passion, that is a smart player, that is adaptable, that is a connected and team player. Because once again, like you already know, we have to coach these players every day. It's not just show up in an AU game and coach them for a couple weeks and then they go back to their parents, and then they show up for another week and play, and then you don't see them again because they go to high school. It's the day to day that matters, right? And I often heard it said one time, like, if you're recruiting players, that type of thing, and you're not sure about their attitude or if they're passionate about it or if they're bought in, that type of thing. I'd rather I'd rather lose to a player. Like, if they go to a conference school, I'd rather lose to a player 2 times a year than them beat me every day in practice. Right. In other words, if they're on your team and they are not good for your program, they're going to beat your team down every single day, and they're going to help you lose every day a little bit. Then I may only have to play them twice a year. So choosing wisely, like you said, the PSA, passionate, smart, and adaptable players. I think it's something that has been a good filter for me as we continue to recruit players moving forward.
Great answer, Coach. Great answer. You saved me there. You saved me there for sure. Um, it's easy to talk about the good. Let's talk about the bad. I think um, as coaches or just people in general, there's always that fork in the road moment, you know, especially in our industry, I think, in regards to you think, well, for most, like, what am I doing here? Is this gonna work long term? Um, you know, it could be the pay, it could be the weight on your family, it could be the toll with administration, it's many different things that can just, you know, try you for lack of better terms. Tell me a situation, how you handled it, um, you know, and how it elevated you to where you are today.
I feel like I'm on an interview. Good. That's a very common interview question.
Am I am I asking the wrong questions, Coach? Or
Oh, oh, that's good. That's a good question. No, for sure. No, but that's also something that's a common question in interviews, because they want to know how you're going to deal with challenges, right? Not how you're going to help them win per se, but what are you going to be like on the worst day, I don't know if I can get into anything too specific, but in 25 years of coaching now, I've seen just about everything. When you choose to involve yourself in the lives of young people, get ready for challenges. And I think it's really important to stay grounded in your principles of who you are, because in those moments, that's what you have to lean on. That sounds very cliche, but it's true. Um, I think if you talk about as you're advancing in the coaching profession, are you going to have tough moments? Did I have moments where I thought about getting out, or that? Absolutely. You try raising four young kids on on a part-time salary and have to work multiple other jobs and that type of thing. It's very challenging. And there were a couple of moments where I was probably pretty close to folding up my tents and just packing in, saying this is obviously not going to work for me for one reason or another. um, I think the no quit attitude that I kind of grew up with, and not it. I was very fortunate to have parents that raised me in a very positive, you know, house. Like dream big, chase your dreams. You can do those. You can do it. Why not you? Those type of. So that was kind of the messaging I got growing up. So I think that helped me out in those moments. But I also think you have to have, once again, you have to have balance in that and some clarity, and say sometimes there is a time to change course, whether it's a career path or whether it's to go to a different situation. For me, a couple times it was to leave more pay, not that it was a lot, to go to a situation that was a better atmosphere for me to grow in, to have better connections, a better group of people to be around, or that could expand. Sometimes you got to get in a different room. Sometimes you got to get in a different situation, and then certain things can open up for you. And I don't think there's a magic potion to that. I think there's you have to a good level of self awareness. I think sometimes as coaches we can be a little bit too arrogant and think that we're something that we're not yet. Um, and there's still things to learn in order to put us in a position to be able to advance. And sometimes it's just a matter of making sure that you have the right people in your corner. I've often told um, men in our profession, because a lot of times men will gravitate towards other guys, and I said, you got to get some female mentors. You've got to get some women who are willing to tell you what you need to hear in this space, because we're coaching females. And I was fortunate to have somebody give me that advice. And so I was able to get around and surround myself with some really good um, mentors or role models, and that were female, and were willing to, uh, were willing to mentor me some, and to be honest with me and tell me some hard truths. So that was important for me. Um, and the landscape of college sports and women's basketball it has changed significantly in the last few years with COVID and NIL and transfer portal and one-time transfer exceptions. So it's going to change as well coming up. And it, like, once again, the adaptable piece. If you're not, if you're stubborn, if you're a stubborn old coach, like, you know, some people, I guess, and you're not adaptable, it'll kick you out pretty quick. I mean, you have to be able to change with the times. You have to be able to ask questions. You have to be humble enough to listen to your staff. I'm blessed. I have a staff that I can go to and say, "Tell me, am I being an idiot, right? Or am I not coming across the right way? Or how is the team here? Like, what are they hearing from me? I know what it sounds like in my head, but what are they hearing?" And then they have. I want this from them. They have the guts to be able to tell me, "Coach, you missed it there," or what about this direction? that type of thing. So um, I think that's always the question to ask. Who have you surrounded yourself with? And are they truth tellers in your life? And are they willing to, um, for young coaches that are trying to advance, I always tell them the same advice. Who can you name that is willing to tell your story without you asking them to? And that's how you get the best jobs or good jobs. Because if you're always getting on the phone and having to make a phone call, hey, will you call this person for me, or hey, will you call this person for me, or I'm interviewing for this job, just want to let you know it's too late at that point. It's a matter of who's willing to go to bat for you without you asking them to. And those are the people that will help you advance, and those are the people that really believe in you.
Okay, coach. So last question. I go and see Kent State play. I watch you guys play Buffalo. Great victory for you. I'm walking out back to my car. What do you want me to feel? What do you feel like I should have seen? Kent State is this. Not the win, not the losses per se. Forget all that. Kent State is this.
Those kids, those young women love to play for each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you can develop a culture where they want to play for each other and they get more excited for each other's success than they do for their own, that's the sweet spot for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
You got a passionate, selfless team that cares about winning more than they care about themselves. So, yep, that's it.
Mm-hmm. All right, coach. Anything I missed you want to share? I know I'm a long-winded guy. I ask a bunch of questions, but there's always something I miss. Favorite book or this or that, or wish you asked me a question about this. And if there's anything, this is your time. Questions for
Well,
me, anything.
if you're long-winded, then what does that make me? I can suck the air out of any room I'm in. I'm just telling you, like, um, I would say I would add a book to it. Like I like to read. I don't love to read. I wish I loved it, but I like to read, and I need to be more. But um, there have been a lot of good books that I've read, but the one book that I have continued to go back to and reference more than any other book is the 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork by John Maxwell. And there were so many just great nuggets of information in there, um, for me, that I've gone back and referenced. And um, that's a book that I would recommend to any coach at any level. The
Mm-hmm.
17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork by John Maxwell. He's got a lot of other good stuff, um, but there, that's been a book that I've continued to go back to.
I'll definitely check that one out, coach. I'm definitely gonna check it out. All right. Well, coach, I really do thank you for your time. I got a lot out of this as always. And, I will be a firm supporter of you this year in your program and hope to see you soon at the Final Four or whenever.
Yeah, that sounds good. Good luck to you guys this year as well, and I'll definitely be following.
Thanks, coach. Thanks. You have a
You
good
guys,
one.
hope we cross paths soon. Take care.
Hopefully. Hopefully.